Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com, and as you can see here, columnist for the Jewish Press.
And I'm having a lot of fun doing all of that, and my column in the Jewish Press is about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. The column's called Albany Beat. And talk about government, we have one of the...
Talk about Jewish government.
Jewish government. We have one of my favorite assemblymen, Chuck Lavine.
Thank you, Mark.
Welcome back to the Jewish View.
Thank you, and thank you, Rabbi. It's good to see you both.
How are things in Glen Cove?
Things are always good in Glen Cove, and we know that.
So what's
I say, how's it good in Albany? Now that's the next big question.
Albany is always fascinating.
Are you still chair of the Ethics Committee?
I am chair of the Assembly Standing Committee on Ethics and Guidance and co-chair of the New York State Legislative Ethics Commission.
Right, so...
Two separate
It
entities.
keeps you busy. You must be busy.
My colleagues keep me too busy.
Too busy. Do you, there's a question about the Senate side about meeting. Do you meet?
We meet more than any other committee.
Why?
Because my colleagues keep me very busy. That's why.
But your meetings are not always open to the public.
Our meetings are almost always confidential, and they must of necessity be confidential, because when we're charged with conducting an investigation of allegations that an assembly member has committed either sexual harassment or has retaliated against a staff member who has made a claim of sexual harassment, we have to be able to have the confidence of the witnesses, of the victims, in order to allow them to tell us what happened. And if their identities are known, that is an inhibiting factor.
Are you allowed to say if any other assemblymen are being, just without naming names, are being considered, or you're looking into anyone?
No, I would not be permitted. We're governed by the civil rights law, which commands confidentiality. I would be committing a crime if I violated that oath of confidentiality.
And what about J-Cope, which some people say is J-Joke or something? Or
well, Joint Commission on Public Ethics is a separate entity,
right,
and it's governed by a set of commissioners who are appointed by and large by the governor. The governor has 6 of the appointees. I believe there are 14 members, and then it's the majority leaders in both houses and the minority leaders who appoint the balance. But the governor's got the, as we would say, the whip hand.
Now, there are committees who, like the Agriculture Committee, would have the Commissioner of Agriculture come in and talk to the committee about what's going on in the agency. Do you ever have the head of JCOPE come into the Ethics Committee just to have an open discussion about maybe what their role is, and to talk to the Assembly Ethics Committee and Guidance?
Mark, that's a real good question, and the answer is this. The Ethics Committee differs from every other committee. Every other committee in the Senate or the Assembly is composed of majority members. So in other words, in the Assembly, if you go to any standing committee except the Ethics Committee, there are more Democrats than Republicans. And vice versa, on the Senate side, there'll be more Senate Republicans than Senate Democrats, because the Senate Republicans rule. We do not consider legislation. Legislation dealing with ethics is considered by the Government Operations Committee. So what we do is simply handle cases, investigations of allegations of wrongdoing. So we don't have the same sort of relationship with chairmen of any or directors of any state agencies as would a standing committee. And while there's communication that goes on between certainly counsel for the Assembly and counsel for JCOPE and counsel for the Legislative Ethics Commission, no, we don't have the need to. We have no one we have no head of a state agency that's charged with legislation with whom we would coordinate.
Well, it wouldn't be out of line or inappropriate to ask for someone from JCOPE to come before your committee just to simply have a friendly conversation. I wouldn't say it's certainly not like a hearing where anyone's on trial or anything.
Exactly.
These committee meetings are very friendly, quite often
It-
they're just simply outlining, you know, the Commissioner of Transportation will go into the Assembly
Yes.
Transportation Committee.
It could very
So-
well happen. And when the time comes that my committee has some time on its hands with no cases to handle and no crises to manage, that may not be a bad idea.
I see, but right now you do, so you're still busy.
We always have
Cases.
activity.
Oh, you do?
That's why the Ethics Committee is the busiest committee of all the committees in the Senate and the Assembly. And by the way, you mentioned the Senate Committee on Ethics. That's a committee that I understand has never met.
Right, well, they're not in a long time. Yeah.
And as I understand their procedures on the Senate side, it's the clerk's office that handles allegations of sexual harassment and retaliation, not the Ethics Committee. We don't know what the
But when
Senate
you
Ethics
talk
Committee
about
does.
two things, the sexual harassment and that, but what about the monetary level? I mean, you almost have to be a detective to figure out the books, and are they taking a bribe, and they're looking at it, you know, you have to be, I mean, a
Yes.
legislator, you have to be an FBI agent over
That's
there.
called having forensic knowledge, and that is best left to the prosecutor's offices, the district attorney's office, and also the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District. And the U.S. Attorney himself, Preet Bharara, has been extraordinarily active
What
in
makes you-
ferreting out corruption.
What makes you so perfect to chair the Ethics and Guidance Committee in the Assembly? What is in your background? What is about you that makes you that?
An ethical person, that's.
I would hope so. I have no idea what the answer to that question is. The former speaker appointed me, and what his criteria was is something I don't know.
What do you think it was?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because sometimes when you know, during the beginning of a session, you put down on a sheet of paper committees that you would like to be on. Did you put down that you'd like to be chair of ethics?
I did
or
not.
He just tapped you on the shoulder one day and said, hey, come.
He
to
said,
the
I'm going to
office
be the
with me."
chair of the Ethics
That's it.
Committee, and that was in the midst of the Vito Lopez crisis back in 2013. And if I told you that I had any sort of real clue about how the Ethics Committee functioned, I hadn't been on it, or how JCOPE functioned, or the Legislative Ethics Commission functions, I wouldn't be telling you the truth. I had to catch up very quickly.
And the current speaker kept you in that
Yes.
position. Is there any reason why, have you gotten any reason why he kept you, or, you know? just-
Doing a good job,
You
that's
know,
all.
my mom, who was really a wonderful person, but at times had no filter, had a very dear friend. And the dear friend was a wonderful woman, but she was married to a guy who nobody could stand. And one day, in front of a lot of people, my mother mentioned to her friend, you know, you're such a fine person, such a lovely, smart person. How does it happen that you're married to your husband? And so her friend was kind of nonplussed and just said, well, if you can't get first best, get second best. So I suspect that whoever the speaker was looking to be the chair of this committee, who would have been first best, wasn't available, so I ended up as second
Who
best.
did you replace?
Danny O'Donnell was my predecessor.
Predecessor. So, okay. Hope you're not investigating it. No, just teasing.
Let's hope
Anyway,
not.
that's it.
I'd be surprised.
But,
But, you know, I wanted to ask you, so just the timeline of this situation. So first it starts with the attorney or the prosecutor and saying, hey, we're looking at a person, and then you look, I mean, once they're a felony, I mean, it's not an issue. They're out of the assembly.
You're asking an excellent question. Let me clarify something, because I don't think I made clear how this system is structured. The Ethics Committee that I chair in the Assembly handles only charges of sexual harassment, retaliation made against members who have made complaints about sexual harassment and discrimination. To this point, we have not had any cases dealing with discrimination. We have had plenty on sexual harassment and retaliation. That is the sole exclusivity of what we do. Now, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics can investigate any violation of the state's ethics laws. The U.S. Attorney's offices and the district attorney's offices have the responsibility of investigating actual criminal conduct. And to their credit, and especially to the credit of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District, there have been a lot of investigations. I almost have the impression that for many years there was sort of an unwritten rule that the federal prosecutors and the state prosecutors were not going to look too deeply into charges of corruption. And you and I, as old Chicagoans, would know exactly what we're talking about here. But that rule is no longer being respected or honored, and nor should it be, because that's what makes the difference.
You mentioned Preet Bharara, and he was in Albany a few months ago, and he gave a speech at the Linda on Central Avenue there. And he said that the rank and file members were enablers for Shelley Silver to do what he did. Do you feel you were an enabler that Shelley got away for so long with what he did?
So let me clarify, and I don't mean to be a stickler, but Bharara's background is in the federal courts. My training was also in the federal courts, where I did appointed work representing people who were not able to pay for their own attorneys. So I want to be very clear. I'm not sure I know the context within which Bharara spoke. Bharara may have been speaking about certain people who may have had some sense of what was going on. But if he was speaking generally about and speaking specifically about the Shelley Silver case, I would challenge him. It certainly took skilled investigators and forensic investigators an awfully long time to be able to draft the complaint against Mr. Silver. It was anything but obvious. Skelos illegal conduct was anything but obvious. So I guess we want to give Mr. Bharara the benefit of a little poetic license, and
afterwards I said to him, you know, when you accuse these people and then they're found, you know, not guilty, I won't say innocent, but not guilty, where do they go to get their reputation back? And he goes, well, we only indict, you know, we only prosecute. Where they go to afterwards is up to them. You know, he had no sympathy for where they go to get their reputation back.
So,
but he was specific. I won't say about all the members that were in, because there were 33 assembly members and 22 senators who, as I put it, are legislative bad apples on my list. 55 total.
Very, very interesting.
Throughout the years.
Throughout the years, yes.
Oh, yes. Well, I should.
Throughout the years. But legislative bad apples, whether it's something as a DWI or sexual harassment or...
So let me share this with you. There's always a danger when people who are engaged in politics speak, because it's easy, sometimes too easy, to engage in hyperbole or exaggeration. And you need only come to the floor of the assembly and listen to the speeches that are made, and very, very often people go a little too far. I have some measure of respect for Mr. Bharara, but I think that if you are offering in context, and I believe you are, what he said, then I would very strongly disagree with him.
And I will send you the clip.
I don't doubt. I don't doubt.
But if
yes.
you haven't heard it, you really need to see in context. I'll send you about a 10-minute clip of what he said and where it came out. And because I have it on audio, and I could certainly share that with you.
I trust you, and I'll look forward to seeing it. But I still would have to imagine that it might be somewhat hyperbolic.
I see. Well, he really was quite firm in his tone of what he said about the rank and file members. He really felt that there were rank and file members who knew. What shocked me about the Shelley Silver case were his dalliances with the two people who came out, which, whether it was proven or not, I mean, I was just surprised about that.
Again, that, as I understand it, was not criminal conduct.
Right. No,
that's
just between us.
one person's vision of morality, or and that was not certainly dispositive of.
That's because of the moral the lack of morality with that. That's what shocked me, so I'm just.
I understand.
You know.
I understand, and
Um,
and I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I think that what most enrages the public has less to do with any moral lapses than it does with the fact that here's a Speaker of the New York State Assembly
Mhm.
who is convicted of, in essence, selling his office,
Mhm.
and that's dangerous.
Now,
And that's dangerous to the entire population of the state of New York. What he did in terms of dalliances,
Is that a good word?
as you call them, to me that's a matter between him and his family.
That's true, and that's why I didn't really want to focus on that. I just thought I'd bring it up as an aside. I just wanted to, also, I heard that when you were in conference that awful day when you had to discuss the Shelley Silver indictment, that Todd Kaminsky, who was in the Assembly at the time, is now a senator, and it was a federal prosecutor, they asked him, the conference asked him if this was something, that they should take seriously. He goes, this is very serious. This is real serious. Is that,
So I don't
remember?
talk about
What goes on in
what
conference?
goes on in conference.
Okay.
But I can say this without violating any confidences. There were some of us who had experience in the federal courts in either prosecuting or defending people who made it very clear to our colleagues that this was indeed a very, very serious matter.
Yeah, right, okay, because people's faces were ashen when they came out of there. I mean, it was really a tough day, for me too, because I really respect Shelley, and it was tough for me. And,
Shelley had been a remarkable leader, and being able to lead a group as diverse as 110 Democrats who essentially compose our Democratic conference is not easy because there's a wide divergence, a very wide divergence of views. Now, if we contrast that with the Republican side, you're going to find a much less of a variety or divergence of views. Yes, that was. It was a very serious time, and to the credit of most of my colleagues, I think they handled it with the degree of gravity. Not everyone, but most of them handled it with the degree of gravity that it deserved.
It was just interesting that I just felt that how the process played out, but I just wish that it wasn't true. I just kept saying, I just hope this isn't true.
Those of us who have had family members or very dear friends outside the political world, I'm talking about real life, who've been in trouble with the law, actually undergo and go through a very similar experience to what the Democratic Conference went through when we learned that Shelley had been charged initially in a complaint. And at first, it almost seems as if many people just can't believe it. It's just such a shock and a trauma. But it didn't take long for the majority of the Democratic majority to comprehend how very serious this was.
Just one more thought on this.
Even two more thoughts.
Okay, thank you. The session is coming to an end as we tape this, and I just, this is a session that up until now, people are saying, we didn't have any indictments this year. And they're celebrating that there was no indictments.
And so what do we say about that? Tov ma'od?
Well, I just find it amazing that the bar went so low that you're not celebrating massive legislation that was passed and something that was good for the people, but you're celebrating wow, we got through one session without an indictment.
So,
No one's going away in handcuffs this
so
session.
Rabbi, as you'll recall, just a few minutes ago before we started taping, we were talking about the differences in the state assembly today
Yeah.
as compared to 2005 when I was first elected to the assembly. There is a much greater turnover. We have a lot of members who are younger and newer representatives. It's a time of great change. And these criminal charges and these investigations are part and parcel of that change in attitude that we are undergoing as New Yorkers. Now, charges against speakers or majority leaders, such as Skelos, are not new. There have been a surprising and amazing number throughout the United States of leaders of state houses who have been convicted of crimes. It's not just here.
Right. No,
Some people suggest, some credible analysts and students of this suggest that perhaps there's too much power that the majority leaders of the houses, of the state houses, have. And as Congress has really gotten itself involved just in utter ideological gridlock. We can't count on Congress to do much of anything. There's much greater level of concentration on our state institutions, legislatures, of filling the gap. And it merits consideration. Now, not to chew your ears off or hock a chinik, as I learned it, as a litvak, as I learned it. But one of, I believe, our great challenges in New York is that our legislative year is based on an agrarian calendar. So in other words, we start for one day, it's a farm style calendar.
Oh, it's not egregious? Not agrarian?
It's
not egregious?
agrarian.
Oh, okay.
So it's designed to get the gentleman farmer
Yes,
legislators out, so they're back taking care of their harvests and their animals in
We used to do
in June.
session 3 months.
Yes.
And then the whole session was wrapped up by the end
Yes.
of March.
So today, there are only a handful of us, and I'm one of them, who know one end of a cow from the other end of a cow, and yet we are saddled with a legislature that is based on a 19th century agrarian farm-style model.
What would you rather see it as?
We should have a state legislature that meets the way Congress meets throughout the years. And to put it in a nutshell, we're here basically 6 months. January, February, and March are entirely consumed with the budget. That's it. There's room for little else in those first 3 months. So we've had, thank goodness, we've had budgets on time for the last years, which is a good thing, and a credit to Andrew Cuomo.
No, credit to David Patterson for getting that through the courts, that the executive budget would be in place if you didn't have amendments to the budget by April 1.
Credit to David Patterson
Right.
for having wise lawyers who read the decision
Right.
that was made in 2005 when Pataki was still governor. That was the decision of the
Well,
Court of Appeals.
but it was still
But
a
you
David
are right.
Patterson.
You may not be entirely correct as to who got that case before the Court of Appeals,
was not
but
Andrew
it was
Cuomo.
Patterson. No, it was Patterson. But
Right.
Cuomo has used his powers to make sure that we have had budgets on time over the course of the last 6 years. These are the fundamental building blocks of effective governance. But we should be meeting throughout the year because January, February, and March, budget. That leaves us with 10 weeks. 10 weeks left, and there are today probably 11,000 freestanding bills pending in the Assembly alone.
And how many
There's
are just
no
one
way.
house? How many of them are 2 houses? I mean, you really do spend a lot of time on one-house bills.
Yes, we do, but one-house bills, very often, if they have merit, become 2 House bills. Nothing is easy in democracy.
What happens sometimes is that when you pass a one-house bill, the governor then incorporates it into a state of the state the following year.
Yes.
Picks it up and claims it as his own.
I don't doubt that, but then I think we agree that there is some merit to one-house bills. This is what democracy is all about. Democracy wasn't designed to function smoothly or easily.
Right.
And we fight it out, and we try to make progress.
Okay.
And even one-house bills that we might say are symbolic, purely symbolic, very often have a greater value than mere simple
Because you can go home to
symbolism.
your district and you could say, hey, look, this is in your newsletters, this is what I tried, and, we did vote on this is how I stand, I'm on record saying this is what I support or don't support.
It's
important.
part of the fight.
Yeah.
And all democracy can do, all our form of democracy can do, is give us an environment in which we can fight these things out and fight them out in a civil way.
Okay, so let me ask you, move
Markey
on.
bill?
What?
You want to talk the Markey bill, or you have
Markey
other
bill?
bills?
No, I just wanted to ask you one thing about the.
You should listen to the rabbi.
Yeah.
You know? You should
I do
listen. I listen to
the
the
rabbi.
I
rabbi.
got bills here I'm gonna talk to you
I have you
about.
part of my congregation, you're pretty
I wanted
good.
to ask you-
Zugmir Apes.
I wanted to ask you about the Jewish Legislators Association.
Certainly.
How is that going?
It's going fine.
How come none of the Jewish legislators, some of the Jewish legislators put on their website that they're a member of the Black, Puerto Rican, Asian Caucus, that they're a member of the Latino Caucus or the Women's Caucus or other caucuses that they're involved in, but nowhere, and not even on your website, do you have that you're president of, except in your bio, but when you have committees or what you're involved in.
Mark, I didn't realize this, and I would call that a shanda.
Okay,
That is a shanda. I'm going to have to speak with them
okay.
and reason with them.
Okay, because you should add it to your website when you have which committees or which groups in the legislature you're involved with. You should be putting that even on your own website.
Now, that's not a bad idea.
And
So
what-
give me some other good ideas.
Okay, I'll tell you. What about a Jewish Heritage Day? You know, we have Taiwanese Heritage Day, we have Canada Day, we have other days of people who, I mean, Senator Diaz has a Boricueño Day or something, I can't even pronounce it. There's all these ethnicities that have their own special heritage days. but we don't have anything.
Every session, we have done something with Jewish identity. And you have attended, I am sure, the seminars, the meetings we've had with the Council General of the
Yes,
State of
well-
Israel, and we have briefings on what's going on in the
They're
Middle
quiet,
East.
But these are quiet, relatively quiet meetings. These are not.
So let me ask you a question.
These are
Let
not
me ask you
well
a question.
With the Israel flag
Oh,
hanging.
no,
or
the
with
last
some
time,
other-
Mark, the last time we had one, we were in hearing room C and it was packed.
Okay, great, do it,
So
keep it going.
you're going to tell me we're going to have a quiet meeting with a bunch of Jewish legislators? I have never seen that. I don't think that that's
Well-
possible. You know, one of the great quotes of one of my favorites, Levi Eshkol, who was
Yes.
president of Israel, was that, and this is his quote exactly, he said, you know, we Jews, we are a disputatious people. He said, argument is our nationality.
That's right.
I have yet to ever be at a meeting with Jewish people where there hasn't been a strong difference of opinion.
But staff doesn't go to those meetings per se. I mean, you know, when you have
No,
something, when
Mark.
you have something in the well,
Mark,
that
I
is
love
more
you.
open.
I love you.
Feelings
But
mutual.
staff, thank you. Staff do go to these
Okay.
meetings.
Well, you know, I think you.
And we have been, as you know, concentrating on trying to get an anti-BDS bill passed.
Okay, let's talk
And
about
you know that there's been some friction between the Senate version and the version that I'm advancing on the Assembly side.
So tell me more about that. What?
No, the Senate version is basically requiring that the state of New York do three things. First, we have to make a list of everyone who advocates BDS. Secondly, we have to make a list of every individual who engages in BDS.
And what is
And
BDS?
thirdly, that is boycott, divestment, and sanction. It's a highly orchestrated movement to delegitimize our strategic ally, the nation of
the
Israel.
third-
The third feature is the state of New York is going to make a list of every corporation that engages in BDS. Now, to the best of our knowledge, there is no corporation with which New York contracts which today engages in the BDS movement, but that's not to guarantee that this will not occur sometime in the future. So, The Assembly version that I have differs. The Assembly version that I have is identical to the version that's now working its way through the state legislature in California. We just want to do this. We don't want to do business. We don't want to invest in corporations that engage in BDS. I personally don't want the state of New York making a list of people who engage in dissent. I don't want the state of New York making a determination that we will not do business with someone who individually decides not to buy OSEM products or SodaStream products. That's missing the mark, and that's an inhibiting factor on free speech in the state of New York. There's something uniquely to me un-American about that. After all, we both have friends and family who've got numbers on the inside of their forearm. That's what happens when you make lists when you shouldn't make lists. The Senate passed its bill. I am firmly convinced that most of the senators didn't have a chance to read it because it was introduced the very first day or second day they were in session. And who's going to vote against Israel? We in the Assembly would not pass that bill. We would look. We have some people, and this is part of democracy. And it's better. It is better for people with whom we don't agree to be able to have the opportunity to engage in civil discourse in a legislative session. We know the dangers that occur when those people are driven underground.
Are you having that bill come up for debate this session?
We may, and that yet remains to be seen.
Can you just have your one House bill come up for debate?
That's entirely possible.
Okay.
There's a great deal of diplomacy and negotiation that's going on even as we speak.
Well, I want to be there for that debate because I want to record Charles Barron's comments when I want to hear what he has to say about this. He's very outspoken.
It would be an interesting debate, and I can guarantee you that when that debate occurs, this bill will pass overwhelmingly.
Oh, I know that, but it's just the odd comments that other legislators who may not be supportive would say.
What I say is,
as a journalist, that's how I focus on it.
I know what sells newspapers. I know what sells newsprint. But better that opponents of this have the opportunity to express their concerns.
Sure. Well,
the fact of the matter is that New York and other states and our nation has engaged and have engaged in economic boycotts and commercial boycotts and commercial discrimination against nations we don't care for. We did that with South Africa, and we can do that now with corporations, and we'll do that with corporations that engage in BDS.
Yeah, Sudan, I think.
Yes, indeed.
And so have you spoken to your friend, the comptroller, who's a former Assemblyman, Tom DiNapoli, about not investing with these nations?
You know, Tom is not only a friend, he's a dear friend, and I can only tell you that Tom and I speak about a wide variety of subjects.
Including this one.
Well, that's the comment that you are making. Now, what are you, the interviewer or the, you know, Mark, what we should do is this. You ask the questions and then run over here and answer the questions, and then run back. You'll get the rabbi will become dizzy looking at you.
I'm back and forth over here. But I think you're way over time. And that's like a bunch of Jews. They have to, like you're saying, there's a big discourse.
The argument that goes on, two Jews.
This is wonderful.
In my little town that I grew up in with about 11,000 people, there were at one time not one synagogue, not two, but three synagogues. And as a little kid, there were two.
And this is the synagogue I go to, and this is the synagogue I don't go to, and every Jew needs a synagogue they don't go to.
Don't argue with me.
In any case, it's always a lot of fun, but it's also very informative.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. It's a great joy to be here.
We always love having you every year, and just tune us up to what's happening in the Assembly, and only for good things. Keep it rolling.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
A Shana Dank.
Success. That's right.
A Shana Dank.